Welcome back to another episode of Junkin' with Junior. Thanks for tuning in, making some more progress on our crew cab square body here. Slow going process, waiting on parts to come in. They keep trickling in one piece at a time, so I get to come out here and put one thing on and then stare at it and wait on more parts. It's just the way it goes, folks. But it is definitely looking better. So we got our core support on in the previous episode. Started laying out some of the wiring over there on the passenger side for the ECU, and turn this light on for you back here. We've got our AC condenser mounted, but I can tell you one thing that so far is, it's not a surprise, but I wasn't expecting it this early on. So remember, this is a aftermarket core support. It is not a GM original. That's what I really wanted, but it didn't work out with the parts truck and stuff, so I just said heck with it. Let's get a reproduction and go for it. Now everything looks really nice. We got it all painted up, put on there, and the AC condenser doesn't fit like it should. So the Chinese are pretty decent at the Olympics, but we still kick their butts at that. But guess what? Another thing is that they cannot do, and that's reproduce a GM square body core support. I don't know how hard it is, because I'm sure at some point in time some American sent one over there so that they could copy it exactly and remake it. But is this one of those things that they do so it's not exactly, so they don't get in trouble with GM? I'm not sure, but here's what I ran into. So the AC condenser is already mounted in here. I wrestled around with that a little bit. There's 4 slots down here for these, or excuse me, 3 slots down here for this mount to sit in. It just has these little tangs that go right down in there. You can go in the outward position and the inward position. On both sides it's the same way. I actually had to fold up one of those ears on the bottom of the mount so that I could scoot it in, and I put a rivet to hold it in place so I don't have to worry about it ever vibrating or twisting out of place. And when I did that, they lined up just fine on both sides. Well, then you get to the top side, and guess what? That hole and that hole doesn't line up, nor does it on the other side. Not the end of the world. I just drilled a little hole, put a number 10 sheet metal screw in there, and I don't have to worry about it. It's solid, it's not going anywhere. The lines line up over there, plenty of clearance. I don't see any issues going on over here. The lines land in that notch just like they're supposed to. They don't rub on the backside. The condenser lines are never straight when you get them. If the box ever takes one hit, it bends that pretty fragile aluminum there. So that all looks good. Got that in place. Check that off the list. This is the way it goes when you have reproduction parts. It's no surprise at all. It is what it is. So it's a new night and we finally got some more new parts. Like you say, they just keep trickling in. Hey, that's good enough for me because I can get a couple things done each night and just keep steady chipping away at this little project here. So I got our 4 new sealed headlight bulbs, not doing any LED conversions because I just don't think they look right. They definitely work better, light up the road better at night, but I love the look of a classic sealed beam with textured glass. That's just the right look for these trucks in my mind. Got 3 of the new connectors. Since we are converting from a single headlight truck, we have to redo the wiring harness. Waiting on 1 more of those to come in. Got the headlight buckets sandblasted and painted up so they're not all crusty rusty. They're ready to go back on. Cleaned up our stainless bezels just on the leading edge where you see on the back side. There's no point in that. And did pick up some stainless screws so we can run those into the buckets. And when I was trying to get the original ones out, they were so rusted in there. It took some lubricant on there, penetrating oil, and a pair of vice grips as well, just to get those screws broke loose, because the heads were already stripped out from years of people trying, and they were all bent up and stuff. So got all those straightened up, dialed in. And we also got the reducer fittings today from Fragola, the number 8 to number 6. So we can get those on our transmission and power steering lines and cooler. So another thing, I have the switch that's going to turn this fan on and off. It's preset to turn on at 180, and they want that on the inlet fitting of the cooler. So they want this to be on the hot fluid coming from the transmission. So I'm going to have to go back to the transmission and trace the lines down the frame rail because they're not marked. They're just 2 black hoses. Before, without having a fan, it didn't matter. It was just coolant, fluid in, fluid out, no big deal. But now we need to get that on the correct side so it has proper hot side signal to turn the fan on and off. So we'll trace those up here, and I'll crawl underneath and show you that. All right, so we're underneath the truck. Here's our 700 R4 transmission. So there is this upper line, which is hard to tell because this lower line kind of blocks our point of view there. So this lower line is going to be the hot fluid coming out of the transmission, and the top one is going to be the cool fluid return. So we're going to trace down this line to the front so we can hook it up on the cooler with the switch in line. Then the other one's obviously real easy to figure out where it's going to go. All right, so working on our last line here, which is the power steering. Got the 2 transmissions hooked up already and one of the power steering. And the reason that you need a power steering cooler, most vehicles you don't, but this truck has a Hydro Boost on it, and I don't know if it's due to small orifices or what in the Hydro Boost unit itself, but when I first put this truck together, I didn't have a power steering cooler on it, and it didn't matter what kind of fluid you put in there, you'd get less than a block down the road, and it would just start screaming that power steering pump because the fluid gets so hot, and I guess it was just boiling inside, so the pump was trying to pump air and it just wasn't happy, and I knew it was going to kill the pump. And from the factory, a lot of Hydro Boost trucks, they'll have just like a simple little horseshoe kind of loop, real small, nothing big at all. So I know we're massive overkill on this cooler here, but that's the only way you can get it in a dual circuit like that from Durali. So I'd rather keep the fluid too cool than too hot. Never have anything to worry about that way. And I just take my time tightening all these lines here because they're kind of, the cooler itself is pretty delicate the way these connectors are hooked onto it. Well, you can see we're using a 7/8 wrench here to tighten them, so you can really easy overpower the cooler and wind up damaging it. So I'm holding this one still with my thumb and just rolling this other one up with my fingers to make sure that we're not damaging the cooler whatsoever. Now that we got that on there, we can put us a little tie wrap on here to hold these nice and neat, so those have a pretty much a straight shot right back to the power steering pump. And then our tranny lines down in there, one has a 90 degree and one has a 180 degree fitting on it. And then there's the temperature switch to turn the fan on and off. Those loop, got them tied onto the cross member there in the middle, tied onto the core support over here above the frame rail. Excuse me, and then they run down the frame rail and back to the transmission. So check that off the list. Those lines are done. Now we can, once we get some more of the wiring headed in the right direction on the truck, we can hook up our power and ground wire here in conjunction with that switch to turn the fan on and off. So as we're chipping away on this whole project of getting it put back together, it's time to get the ECU figured out. Still waiting on the radiator and fans to come in, so we got a little bit of time on that. So I'm going to get some of this other dumb time-consuming stuff out of the way. And I thought this would be a really nice location right here. Now, it used to sit right here on the inside of the fender, and the catch can for the radiator tank was right in this area here, and it was a really tight fit, and it wasn't my favorite. I couldn't get to the USB port, and I wanted to move the ECU, so this was the best thing that I came up with. So we got our factory battery tray here, and I had this piece of sheet metal, and I thought, wow, I could just weld it right on there, grind it down, radius these corners off, drill some holes in it. Now we're ready to put the ECU right there, and our wires are going to come straight up the bottom like this, so we can actually tuck a bunch of these wires down with these hoses here and kind of, get them out of the main point of view, if you will, and just kind of tidy everything up a little bit. And it's one of those little things that, no, it doesn't have to be done. It was perfectly fine the way it was before. But while I'm redoing this truck, I'm just kind of slowing down and taking my time to do everything and kind of forced to slow down while we're still waiting on parts. But just little things here and there. It's really going to tidy up the whole project when it's all done. The average person's not going to notice it. They won't know the difference from before to what it is now as far as the ECU mounted like that. But it's just the little things that, I want to do it. I have the time to do it, so let's do it. Why not? And next we got to run up to the hardware store. I got to grab some little stainless screws so we can mount the ECU on there. I'm going to grab a few more fasteners while I'm at it. There's these plastic tabs that go through here that hold the trim, and I need to get those self-tapping metal little stamped sheet metal nuts for it. A few other little screws go through the top just to kind of tidy things up a little bit. So we're going to head on up to the hardware store. If you live in a small town and you got an Ace Hardware close by, you live in the right kind of town. So love me some Pickett's Ace Hardware here. Let's run on inside and grab us some hardware so we can get this stuff mounted. All right, here we go. Stainless steel heaven. If you can't find the stainless steel fasteners you're looking for at the Ace Hardware, you probably ain't gonna get them. So we're gonna start with some, let's see, 5/16 quarter. .1032. These gonna fit right through the ECU mount. Then we got just enough room for a lock nut to go on the back side. Alright, so we got this nice little handful of all the stainless screws to mount the ECU, some of the trim pieces, and a couple of push-on nuts for some trim pieces as well. So a bunch of good pieces of the puzzle there, and now we can carry on. Back at the shop. So you can see where we got our ECU mounted there. I think that works out really nice and clean. I'm really happy with that. Fits nice against the coolant tank. I know I said I was going to get rid of this and use like an aftermarket aluminum one or something, but I just didn't have it in my heart to do it. This is a perfect condition factory tank, and I like it. It fits there. It's nice and clean. Doesn't look like anything's cobbed up or added to it. So I went ahead and put it right back where it was since we have the room for it. It's one less part that I have to buy. Why buy an aluminum one when this one works perfectly fine? So I can get some of our wiring dialed in now as well. Started peeling some of it back and realized what a crappy job I did on some of the stuff initially. So I'm definitely going to take my time, slow down, and get that stuff tight and right. The harness is probably going to come, down the inside, and we can put it up under here, because once it's plugged into the ECU, we're good. We don't have to unplug that, but we will be able to access the USB port right over here, this little blue cap right there. We'll be able to get to that USB port whenever we need it, much easier than it was in the past. So I think for now we can take this tank back off now that we know everything clears, plug our ECU back in, and really start tidying up some of the wiring. The main power wires for the ECU, I went ahead and plugged those in, tucked them underneath the battery tray here, and they loop around along with the relay wires for the intercooler pump. And it's just, this is the stuff I'm talking about when you take a little bit of time and tidy everything up. So we got our relay right down here now for the intercooler pump, and the fuse holder stuck it right there as well. So the two things that run that pump are right there with it in case if we ever need to diagnose it in the future. Just makes life a little bit easier, and overall this thing's coming together and just going to be so much cleaner. I really can't wait to see the final product.